Taoiseach, I'm aware that you briefed party leaders last evening about the government's plans on how to deal with Brexit, and there is no doubt that it is the single biggest challenge that all of us on the island of Ireland face. What we need, Taoiseach, is a coherent and a multi-layered response to dealing with this. In your announcement yesterday, there were plans for forums and lots of dialogue, and all that's important. But we also need practical measures in the short term to assist businesses dealing with the fallout from Brexit. This morning, the euro is trading at 88.2 pence sterling. Before the referendum in June, the euro was trading at 77 pence sterling. That means for Irish businesses exporting to the UK, their goods and services have, in relative terms, become 14% more expensive. That makes us 14% less competitive in terms of our trade with the UK. Many analysts predict that sterling will fall further, with some even predicting that it will reach parity with the euro in the next year or so. This has already cost jobs and will indeed cost an awful lot more over the period ahead if this trend continues. On top of that, inbound tourism from the UK is inevitably going to be affected because it's more expensive, and we are all well aware of the impact on border communities of the fall in sterling and indeed the deep uncertainty that now prevails about the border post-Brexit. In addition, the very terms in which we will be able to trade with the UK post-Brexit are unclear and mired in uncertainty. We must accept and prepare for the facts, Taoiseach, that Brexit is going to happen, possibly within a 2.5-year period. And we must also prepare for the fact and the possibility, indeed, that it may not happen in an orderly way, and certainly the Prime Minister's comments over the weekend have heightened the risk of a so-called hard Brexit. Next week's budget, Taoiseach, presents an ideal opportunity to help businesses address the major challenges posed by Brexit. Fianna Fáil would like to see the 9% VAT rate on tourism and hospitality fully retained, unlike our colleagues Sinn Féin. We'd like to see an improved capital gains tax regime for entrepreneurs, a real focus by Enterprise Ireland and other agencies on supporting exporting firms who are very dependent on the UK market to achieve greater market diversification. We want to see investment in infrastructure in the border region to make us more competitive in that part of the island, to establish a national hedging strategy as recommended by the Irish Exporters Association. And I would ask you to read their budget submission, Taoiseach, because it addresses the very specific issue which has now come to the fore in terms of SMEs. They want a strategy managed by the NTMA and offering a discounted exchange rate to qualifying businesses. And there has to be a renewed focus on reducing costs that the state can influence, whether it be insurance, transport, energy costs, to make us more competitive and deal with the inevitable headwinds that Brexit proposes. So there is an opportunity within a week to set out our stall and to help up to 800,000 employees who are now working in SMEs to deal with these major challenges.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy McGrath, for his comments. Yes, we had a very good meeting with the leaders of the different parties yesterday in respect of Brexit and a number of other matters. Deputy McGrath will have been briefed by and spoken to by the Minister for Finance in respect of the general situation as we approach this budget. The issues that you raise are real and they're important and they're very urgent. Clearly, the question of Brexit itself will not become central focus from a European point of view until the Prime Minister actually moves the Article 50 at the end of March. At least we have clarity on that now. In the meantime, however, Government has outlined at some length yesterday, put in place a whole series of agendas to deal with the issues that are arising. You mentioned a number here. Obviously, the 9% VAT was brought about following the reduction from the 13.5% quite a number of years ago to stabilise an industry that was in seriously bad shape. Obviously, that industry has recovered and has been a catalyst in creating thousands of jobs. And that decision was followed by the decision to remove the travel tax, which had a further impact in terms of numbers being brought in here by the different air carriers. That's an issue that obviously is one that Government will consider in the context of the budget for next week. The question of capital gains for entrepreneurs is one that the Minister did refer to and actually introduced the first initiative from an Irish point of view on that last year. We didn't have the resources to equate with the extent of what was done in Britain, but the Minister is conscious of that also. This morning I opened the Exporters Conference in the RDS, where Enterprise Ireland have brought back all of their staff from overseas to talk to hundreds of small entrepreneurs and medium enterprises here in Ireland about diversification into new markets in the United States, Canada, the European Union and so on. Obviously the Credit Guarantee Amendment Act was introduced in February and I can confirm to Deputy McGrath that the Department of Finance, the Department of Jobs and Enterprise and the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland are looking at the question of what options might be open in terms of financial supports or access to credit for businesses which are now suffering because of the decline in the strength of sterling. I will read the report that you mentioned, and obviously all of these matters are very important in the context of employment growing, unemployment dropping, a steady growth rate here, but also a very bright opportunity for many Irish firms to continue to expand in the time ahead. This is a matter of urgency, and I hope that government, in its decisions finally about the budget for next week, will have a number of measures in there which we might call Brexit-proofing measures in respect of the issues that Deputy McGrath has raised.
Deputy McGrath, you have 1 minute for a supplementary.
Thank you, Taoiseach, thank you for your response. I mean, the reality is that there are thousands of businesses operating in Ireland today who are very dependent on the UK market. That is the reality. Many mortgages being paid, many wages and salaries every week and every month are dependent on having access to the UK market on reasonable terms. The fall in sterling, the possibility of tariffs and customs being reinstated, it really is a doomsday scenario for so many businesses across this country. And I think the message they want to hear next week is that the government is prepared to provide tangible supports to assist them to work their way through these difficulties. We all know the dependence, for example, of the agri-food sector on the UK market. Deputy Brendan Smith has been raising issues around the mushroom industry, for example, in recent times. So there have to be practical measures that will make a real difference, Taoiseach, and that will involve providing extra supports through the taxation system and also through funding, for example, for Enterprise Ireland, because these challenges are acute. And make no mistake about it, that while there are some opportunities for Ireland in relation to Brexit, particularly on the inward investment front, from an exporting point of view, it is about damage limitation. It's about assisting firms to work their way through a very uncertain time. Many of them will be going to banks looking for working capital, looking for support at a time when the banks will be asking, well, we can't even be sure that you're going to have access to the UK market in 2.5 years' time without tariffs and without customs being imposed. So we need to provide our support. Next week has to be a very important first step in doing that.
Taoiseach, 1 minute.
There are 200,000 jobs in this country dependent on exports to the United Kingdom. Over 7 billion in exports there speaks for itself, many of those in the agri-sector. Minister Creed's commented on that and has met with different groups. Obviously, we've already had evidence, Laskin Corla, of jobs being lost here because of the situation insofar as exports and the currency fluctuations are from the agri-sector into Britain. I think it's important that we reflect on the capacity of our two enterprises, Enterprise Ireland in terms of companies exporting, and IDA in terms of attracting foreign direct investment in here, in the context of the personnel, the numbers that they have there. And I think the Minister will reflect on that very carefully before budget next week. This is a matter of the greatest urgency, and as Deputy pointed out, so many jobs are dependent upon this for repayments of mortgages, for building of houses, for maintaining family life here in Ireland. So it's a matter that was brought very much to the fore this morning, a very opportune time for Enterprise Ireland to say that innovation means business. They're very optimistic, looking at the future with where real opportunities exist, and talking to people who, despite all the difficulties, are making serious progress. So take it from me that government will reflect where it can. We cannot do everything here, given the scale of what we have to contend with, but we do intend to put in a number of measures insofar as we can to Brexit-proof and support in a tangible way Irish firms exporting to the United Kingdom.